Welcome to International Dispute Negotiation, your guide to resolving disputes everywhere.
This is Mike McElrath, and this podcast is about different ways of accepting and managing the risks of dispute resolution, presenting them through the eyes of experts from different countries and backgrounds. We're here with Antonio Tavares, lawyer from Brazil, but you've got offices in different locations, and we have a very loud air conditioning system going on in the background on a very hot day here in Florence. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice before we talk a little bit about dispute resolution in Brazil.
Okay, and my name is Antonio Tavares. I'm a member of the Brazilian Bar and the New York Bar. We have offices today in Rio, São Paulo, and Brasilia, and also New York and Woodstock. The firm today has about...
By the way, I think you are the only firm I know that has offices in both Rio and Woodstock.
Yeah, two of the nicest places on earth, so it's a high-quality working environment. But today we have about 22 to 23 lawyers working in all these offices. For Brazilian standards, it's a small to medium firm, and we'll probably grow a little bit by the end of the year, but won't be too much more than that.
And the name of the firm, just for anybody who might be interested, is
Flecha de Lima and Tavares Pais, Advogados.
And great, Antonio. I really appreciate taking some time today during your visit to Florence to talk a little about disputes in Brazil and how they operate. And maybe we could start talking immediately about the court system in Brazil and litigating in the courts. I think one question that people often want to know when you're talking about, assuming that you're not from Brazil and don't have familiarity, is how are the courts? If, for example, let's say I come from an Italian company or a U.S. company, should I be concerned that the courts are not independent, or do they favor local companies? Before we even talk about efficiency, is there a home court advantage to the company located in Brazil?
Well, I think there's always a home court advantage, but much more because people will know the way things operate in a certain place than because there is discrimination against foreign companies. An American company, an Italian company, a foreign company can do fare as better as well in Brazil as a Brazilian company can. There's no such discrimination, especially in the capitals.
Okay, so it's fair. Let's say the courts, the assumption should be that the courts will be fair.
They will be fair. You may have some disadvantage being a foreigner if you're litigating in a small town with a local judge against one or two individuals who live locally. That may turn the table a little bit. But any inequalities in the decision at that lower level would be corrected at an appellate level.
Right, which, by the way, may be the same assumption that would be almost any country. If you're in a small town in France or in England or the United States,
you'd have
with 50,000 people, there may be 3 or 4 judges in the whole town. They probably, or even smaller towns, the judges and the local people probably know each other. So I guess that's always a risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what about in disputes with the government or government-owned entities? Are the courts still independent and decision makers?
Yes, they are independent. It's not difficult to see difficult decisions against the government or against government-owned entities. The only difference is that if it's a federal government, these lawsuits would be litigated in federal court rather than state court. Right. That's the only difference.
And well, let's talk for a second then, since we've addressed the question about fairness. What about efficiency? Are the courts relatively, or before we get to efficiency, what about competency? Do you think you have professional judges and a professional judicial class, or is the Are these lawyers who then become judges? How does the system work in Brazil for being qualified as a judge?
When the system was created in the beginning of last century, it was thought that judges would over time lose touch with the reality. So what was decided is that the composition of the courts will be divided into 5/5. One will be filled with a representative from the public prosecutor's office. One will be filled by a representative of the local bar, and then 3 will be promotions from career judges. And this could happen at any time, and that this brings a little bit more of a reality into the decisions of these appellate courts. In most cases, they are promoted by merit, and if the individual is not promoted until a certain time, he or she will be promoted by length of work, the time that he's been
seniority. Yeah.
Yes. Generally, it's a 5-member chamber in each appellate court. They could have from 3, 4 up to 20, 25 chambers.
And do judges come? Do you qualify immediately as a judge, or do you have to be a lawyer first to have a certain number of years of experience?
You need a minimum of 5 years practice as a practicing attorney.
As a lawyer.
As a lawyer, then you have to take a test. It's composed of a series of tests for to see whether the candidate knows all the areas of the law. Then there is a psychiatric test, and then a couple of other tests that I don't remember right now.
And are judges fairly well compensated for the work that they do?
Compared to the minimum salary in Brazil, yes.
Okay.
Compared to
so it attracts people. It attracts people who are looking to have a good position.
Yes, absolutely yes.
So,
absolutely yes.
And do you think that the result is you get a fairly good or high level of competency in the courts, at least in the large cities?
In general, you do.
Yeah, okay.
They generally come from good schools, they have a good background, and they have 2 years of probation. If they don't do well in those 2 years, then they can be fired. Otherwise, it's for life.
Okay. Then now let's move on to the question of efficiency, which is often, is not determined by the judges themselves, but can be determined by just the fact that there aren't. You can have the best judges in the world, but if they don't have enough of them, and there's so many cases, then the system will not be efficient.
That is a problem some places in Brazil. Just to give an example, Rio de Janeiro is a state with a fairly reasonable group of judges, but an excellent, quite well organized court system. It's all in the internet, it's all computerized, so it's much easier for cases to move forward.